We're reading 80 through 84 today. Don't know what to expect. This sucks. This sucks so bad. Okay, anyway, yes, I do have the Squishmallow. I need to come up with a name for him. We're reading chapters 80 through 84 today. Wow. Alright, chapter 80. Alid had been in the dungeon so long that she'd lost track of time, but she'd felt the ripple in the world, could have sworn she heard the wind singing her name, heard panic shouts, and then nothing. No one explained what it was, and no one came. No one was coming for her. She wondered how long Vernon would wait before he gave her to one of those things. She tried counting meals to track time, but the food they gave her was the same for breakfast and dinner, and her meal times changed around, as if they wanted her to lose track. As if they wanted her to fold herself into the darkness of the dungeon so that when they came for her, she'd be willing, desperate just to see the sun again. The door to her cell clicked open, and she staggered to her feet as Vernon slipped inside. He left the door ajar behind him, and she blinked at the torchlight as it stung her eyes. The stone hallway beyond was empty. He probably hadn't brought guards with him. He knew how futile running would be for her. I'm glad to see they've been feeding you. A shame about the smell, though. I would have killed him. She refused to be embarrassed by it. Smell was the least of her concerns. Alid pressed herself against the slick, freezing stone wall. Maybe, if she got lucky, she'd find a way to get the chain around his throat. I'll send someone to clean you up tomorrow. Vernon began to turn, as if his inspection were done. For what? She managed to ask. Her voice was already hoarse with disuse. He looked over his thin shoulder. Now that magic has returned. Magic. That was what the ripple had been. I want to learn what lies dormant in your bloodline. Our bloodline. The Duke is even more curious what will come of it. Please, she said. I'll disappear. I'll never bother you. Parath is yours. It's all yours. You've won. Just let me go. Vernon clicked his tongue. I do like it when you beg. Ugh. He glanced into the hall beyond and snapped his fingers. Cormac. A young man stepped into view. He was a man of unearthly beauty, with a flawless face beneath his red hair, but his green eyes were cold and distant, horrific. There was a black collar around his throat. Darkness leaked from him in tendrils, and as his eyes met with hers, memories tugged at her, horrible memories, of a leg that had slowly broken, of years of terror, of... Leash it, Vernon snapped, or she'll be no fun for you tomorrow. The red-haired young man sucked the darkness back into himself, and the memories stopped. Alid vomited her last meal onto the stones. Vernon chuckled. Don't be so dramatic, Alid. A little incision, a few stitches, and you'll be perfect. The demon prince smiled at her. You'll be given into his care afterward, to make sure that everything takes as it should. But with magic so strong in your bloodline, how could it not? Perhaps you'll outshine those yellow legs. After the first time, Vernon mused. Maybe His Highness will even perform his own experiments with you. The acquaintance that sold him out mentioned in his letter that Cormac enjoyed playing with young women when he lived in Rifthold. Gods. Why? She begged. Why? Vernon shrugged. Because I can. He walked out of the cell, taking the demon prince, her betrothed, with him. As soon as the door clicked shut, Alid bolted for it, yanking on the handle, tugging until the metal bit into her hands and rubbed them raw, begging Vernon, begging anyone to hear her, remember her. But there was no one. Manon was more than ready to fall into bed at last. After all that had happened, she hoped that the young queen was lingering around Rifthold and had understood the message. The halls of the keep were in an uproar, bustling with messengers who avoided looking at her. Whatever it was, she didn't care. She wanted to bathe and then sleep for days. When she awoke, she'd tell Alid what she'd learned about her queen, the final piece of the life debt she owed. Manon shouldered into her room. Alid's pallet of hay was tidy, the room spotless. The girl was probably skulking about somewhere, spying on whoever seemed most useful to her. Manon was halfway to the bathing room when she noticed the smell, or lack of it. Alid's scent was worn, stale, as if she hadn't been here for days. Manon looked toward the fire, no embers. She reached a hand over it, not a hint of warmth. Manon scanned the room. No signs of a struggle, but Manon was out of the door the next moment, headed back downstairs. She made it 3 steps before her prowl turned into a full-on sprint. She took the stairs 2 and 3 at a time and leapt the last 10 feet onto the landing, the impact shuddering through her legs, now strong. So wickedly strong, with magic returned. If there had been a time for Vernon to get back at her for taking a lead from him, it would have been while she was away. And if magic ran in Elid's family along with the Iron Teeth blood in her veins, its return might have awakened something. They want kings, Kaltain had said that day. Hall after hall, stairwell after stairwell, Manon ran, her iron nails sparking as she gripped corners to swing herself around. Servants and guards darted out of her way. She reached the kitchens moments later, Iron Teeth out. Everyone went dead silent as she leapt down the stairs, heading right for the head cook. Where is she? The man's ruddy face went pale. Who? The girl, Elid. Where is she? The cook's spoon clattered to the floor. I don't know. I haven't seen her in days, Wing Leader. She sometimes volunteers at the laundry, so maybe. Manon was already sprinting out. The head laundress, the haughty bull, snorted and said she hadn't seen Elid, and perhaps the cripple had gotten what was coming to her. Manon left her screaming on the floor, 4 lines gouged across her face. Manon hurtled up the stairs and across an open stone bridge between 2 towers, the black rocks smooth against her boots. She had just reached the other side when a woman shouted from the opposite end of the bridge. Wing Leader. Manon slammed to a stop so hard she almost collided with the tower wall. When she whirled, a human woman in a homespun gown was running after her, reeking of whatever soaps and detergents they used in the laundry. The woman gulped down great breaths of air, her dark skin flushed. She had to brace her hands on her knees to catch her breath, but when she lifted her head and said, "One of the laundresses sees a guard who works in the keep dungeons. She said that Elid's locked up down there. No one's allowed in but her uncle. Don't know what they're planning to do, but it can't be good." What dungeons? There were 3 different ones here, along with the catacombs in which they kept the Yellowlegs coven. She didn't know. He'll only tell her so much. Some of us girls were trying to see if there was anything to be done, but tell no one that you spoke to me. Manon turned. 3 dungeons, 3 possibilities. Wing Leader, the young woman said. Manon looked over her shoulder. The woman put a hand on her heart. Thank you. Manon didn't let herself think about the laundress's gratitude or what it meant for those weak, helpless humans to have even considered trying to rescue Elid on their own. She did not think that woman's blood would be watery or taste of fear. Manon launched into a sprint, not to the dungeon, but to the witches' barracks, to the 13. Damn. The ridiculousness thing was indeed not real. I don't think it was a scam because I didn't lose any money. I didn't really give them any information to where I could lose money. But I never ended up on the show, so, which I'm kind of glad for now. Okay. I just finished chapter 80, so we're on 81 now. Elid's uncle sent 2 stone-faced female servants down to scrub her, both bearing buckets of water. She tried to fight when they stripped her, but the women were walls of iron. Any sort of black-beak blood in Elid's veins, she realized, had to be the diluted kind. When she was naked before them, they dumped the water on her and attacked her with their brushes and soaps, not even hesitating as they washed her everywhere, even when she shrieked at them to stop. A sacrificial offering, a lamb to the slaughter. Shaking, weak from the effort of fighting them, Elid had hardly any strength to retaliate as they dragged combs through her hair, yanking hard enough that her eyes watered. They left it unbound and dressed her in a plain green robe with nothing beneath. Elid begged them, over and over. They might as well have been deaf. When they left, she tried to squeeze out of the cell door after them. The guard shoved her back in with a laugh. Elid backed up until she was pressed against the wall of her cell. Every minute was closer to her last. A stand. She'd make a stand. She was a Blackbeak, and her mother had secretly been one, and they would both go down swinging. Force them to gut her, to kill her before they could touch her, before they could implant that stone inside her, before she could birth those monsters. The door clicked open. 4 guards appeared. The prince is awaiting in the catacombs. Elide dropped to her knees, shackles clinking. Please, please, now. Two of them shoved into the cell, and she couldn't fight back against the hands that grabbed under her arms and dragged her toward that door. Her bare feet tore on the stones as she kicked and thrashed, despite the chain trying to claw free. Closer and closer, they hauled her like a bucking horse toward the open cell door. The two waiting guards sniggered, eyes on the flap of the robe that fell open as she kicked, revealing her thighs, her stomach, everything to them. Elide sobbed, even as she knew the tears would do her no good. They just laughed, devouring her with their eyes, until a hand with glittered iron nails shoved through the throat of one of them, puncturing it wholly. The guards froze, the one at the door whirling at the spray of blood. He screamed as his eyes were slashed into ribbons by one hand, his throat shredded by another. Both guards collapsed to the ground, revealing Manon Blackbeak standing behind them. Blood ran down her hands, her forearms, and Manon's golden eyes glowed as if they were living embers as she looked at the two guards gripping Elide, as she beheld the disheveled robe. They released Elide to grab their weapons, and she sagged to the floor. Manon just said, "You're already dead, men," and then she moved. Elide didn't know if it was magic, but she'd never seen anyone in her life move like that, as if she were a phantom wind. Manon snapped the neck of the first guard with a brutal crunch as the second one lunged for her, Elide scrambling out of the way. Manon only laughed and twirled away, moving behind him to plunge her hand into his back, into his body. His shriek blasted through the cell. Flesh tore, revealing a white column of bone, his spine, which she gripped, her nails shredding deep and broken too. Damn! Elide trembled at the man who fell to the ground, bleeding and broken, and at the witch standing over him, bloodied and panting, the witch who had come for her. "We need to run," Manon said. Manon knew rescuing Elide would be a statement, and knew there were others who would want to make it with her, but chaos had broken out in the keep as she had raced to summon her 13. News had come. The king of Ardalan was dead, destroyed by Aelin Galathinius. She had shattered his glass castle, used her fire to spare the city from a deadly wave of glass, and declared Dorian Havillard king of Ardalan. The witch killer had done it. People were in a panic. Even the witches were looking to her for answers. What would they do now that the mortal king was dead? Where would they go? Were they free of their bargain? Later. Manon would think of those things later. Now she had to act. So she had found her 13 and ordered them to get the wyvern saddled and ready. 3 dungeons. "Hurry, Blackbeak," whispered a strange, soft female voice in her head that was at once old and young and wise. "You race against doom." Manon had hit the nearest dungeon, Astrid, Sorel, and Vesta at her back, the green-eyed demon twins behind them. Men began dying, fast and bloody. No use arguing, not when the men took one look at them and drew their weapons. The dungeon held rebels of all kingdoms, who pleaded for death when they saw them, in such states of unspeakable torment that even Manon's stomach turned. But no sign of Elide. They had swept the dungeon, Feline and Fallon lingering to make sure they hadn't missed anything. The second dungeon held more of the same. Vesta stayed this time to sweep it again. "Faster, Blackbeak," the wise female voice begged her, as if there were only so much she might interfere. Faster. Manon ran like hell. The third dungeon was above the catacombs, and so heavily guarded that black blood became a mist around them as they launched themselves into tier after tier of soldiers. Not one more female would she allow them to take. Sorel and Astrid plunged into the soldiers, plowing a path for her. Astrid ripped out the throat of one man with her teeth while she gutted another with her nails. Black blood sprayed from Astrid's mouth as she pointed to the stairs ahead and roared, "Go!" So Manon had left her second and third behind, leaping down the stairs, around and around. There had to be a secret entrance from these dungeons into the catacombs, some quiet way to transport Elide. "Faster, Blackbeak," that sage voice barked, and as a little wind... Why my heart racing right now? My heart is racing. I feel like something's about to happen. Like, I'm scared. I'm scared. As a little wind pushed at Manon's feet as if it could hurry her along, she knew that it was a goddess peering over her shoulder, a lady of wise things, who perhaps had watched over Elide her entire life, muted without magic. But now that it was free, Manon hit the lowest level of the dungeon, a mere floor above the catacombs. Sure enough, at the end of the hall, a door opened onto a descending staircase. Between her and that staircase were 2 guards sniggering at an open cell door as a young woman begged for their mercy. It was the sound of Elid's weeping. That girl of quiet steel and quicksilver wit who had not wept for herself or her sorry life, only faced it with grim determination that made Manon snap entirely. She killed those guards in the hall. She saw what they had been laughing at. The girl gripped between 2 other guards, her robe tugged open to reveal her nakedness, the full extent of that ruined leg. Her grandmother had sold them to these people. She was a Blackbeak. She was no one's slave, no one's prize horse to breed. Neither was Elid. Her wrath was a song in her blood, and Manon had merely said, "They were already dead men," before she unleashed herself on them. When she chucked the last guard's body onto the ground, when she was covered in black and blue blood, Manon looked at the girl on the floor. Elid tugged her green robe shut, shaking so badly Manon thought she'd puke. She could smell vomit already in the cell. They had kept her here, in this rotting place. "We need to run," Manon said. Elid tried to rise but couldn't so much as get to her knees. Manon stalked to her, helping the girl to her feet, leaving a smear of blood on her forearm. Elid swayed, but Manon was looking at the old chain around her ankles. With a swipe of her iron nail, she snapped through it. She'd unlock the shackles later. "Now," Manon said, tugging Elid into the hall. There were more soldiers shouting from the way she'd come, and Astrid and Sorel's battle cries rang out down the stairs. But behind them, from the catacombs below, more men, Valg, curious about the clamor leaking in from above, bringing Elid into the whatever, might very well kill her, but if the soldiers from the catacombs attacked from behind, worse, if they brought one of their princes. Regret. It had been regret she'd felt that night she'd killed the Crochin. Regret and guilt and shame for acting on blind obedience, for being a coward when the Crochin had held her head high and spoken truth. They have made you into monsters. Made, Manon, and we feel sorry for you. It was regret that she'd felt when she heard Astrid's tale, for not being worthy of trust, and for what she had allowed to happen to those yellow legs. She did not want to imagine what she might feel should she bring Elid to her death, or worse, brutality, discipline, obedience. It did not seem like a weakness to fight for those who could not defend themselves, even if they weren't true witches, even if they meant nothing to her. "We're going to have to battle our way out," Manon said to Elid, but the girl was wide-eyed, gaping at the cell doorway. Standing there, her dress flowing around her like liquid night, was Kaltain. Damn. Okay, but Kaltain's in charge, so I'm not worried. Should I be worried? I'm not worried. Kaltain's got herself. Chapter 82. Elid stared at the dark-haired young woman, and Kaltain stared back. Manon let out a warning snarl. "Unless you want to die, get the rutting hell out of the way." Kaltain, her hair unbound, her face pale and gaunt, said, "They're coming now, to find out why she has not yet arrived." Manon's bloodied hand was sticky and damp as it clamped around Elid's arm and tugged her toward the door. The single step, the freedom of movement without the chain. Elid almost sobbed, until she heard the fighting ahead. Behind them, from the dark stairwell at the other end of the hall, the rushing feet of more men approached from far below. Kaltain stepped aside as Manon pushed past. "Wait," Kaltain said. "They will turn this keep upside down looking for you. Even if you get airborne, they will send out riders after you and use your own people against you, Blackbeak." Manon dropped Elid's arm. Elid hardly dared to breathe as the witch said, "How long has it been since you destroyed the demon inside that collar, Kaltain?" A low, broken laugh. "A while. Does the Duke know? My dark liege sees what he wants to see." She shifted her eyes to Elid. Exhaustion, emptiness, sorrow, and rage danced there together. "Remove your robe and give it to me." Elid backed up a step. "What?" Manon looked between them. "You can't trick them. They see what they want to see," Kaltain said again. The men closing in on either side grew nearer with every uneven heartbeat. "This is insane," Elid breathed. "It'll never work." "Take off your robe and give it to the lady," Manon ordered. "Do it now." No room for disobedience. So Alid listened, blushing at her own nakedness, trying to cover herself. Kaltain merely let her black dress slip from her shoulders. It rippled on the ground. Her body, what they had done to her body, the bruises on her, the thinness. Kaltain wrapped herself in the robe, her face empty again. Alid slid on the gown, its fabric horribly cold when it should have been warm. Kaltain knelt before her, one of the dead guards. Oh, gods, those were corpses lying there, and ran her hand over the hole in the guard's neck. She smeared and flicked blood over her face. Her neck, her arms, the robe. She ran it through her hair, tugging it forward, hiding her face until bits of blood were all that could be seen, folding her shoulders inward until Kaltain looked like Alid. You could be sisters, Vernon had said. Now they could be twins. Please, come with us, Alid whispered. Kaltain laughed quietly. Dagger, Blackbeak. Manon pulled out a dagger. Kaltain sliced it deep into the hideous scarred lump in her arm. In your pocket, girl, Kaltain said to her. Alid reached into the dress and pulled out a scrap of dark fabric, frayed and ripped at the edges as if it had been torn from something. Alid held it toward the lady as Kaltain reached into her arm, no expression of pain on that beautiful, bloodied face, and pulled out a glimmering sliver of dark stone. Kaltain's red blood dripped off it. Carefully, the lady set it onto the scrap of fabric Alid held out and folded Alid's fingers around it. A dull, strange thudding pounded through Alid as she grasped the shard. What is that? Manon asked, sniffing subtly. Kaltain just squeezed Alid's fingers. You find Selena Sardothian. Give her this. No one else. No one else. Tell her that you can open any door if you have the key, and tell her to remember her promise to me, to punish them all. When she asks why, tell her I said that they would not let me bring the cloak she gave me, but I kept a piece of it, to remember that promise she made, to repay her for a warm cloak in a cold dungeon. Kaltain stepped away. I'm gonna cry! We can take you with us, Alid tried again, a small, hateful smile. I have no interest in living, not after what they did. I don't think my body could survive without their power. Kaltain huffed a laugh. I shall enjoy this, I think. Manon tugged Alid to her side. They'll notice you without the chains. They'll be dead before they do, Kaltain said. I suggest you run. Manon didn't ask questions, and Alid didn't have time to say thank you before the witch grabbed her and they ran. She was a wolf. She was death, devourer of worlds. The guards found her curled up in the cell, shuddering at the carnage. They didn't ask questions, didn't look twice at her face before they hauled her down the hall and into the catacombs. Such screaming here, such terror and despair, but the horrors under the other mountains were worse, so much worse. Too bad she would not have the opportunity to also spare them, slaughter them. She was a void, empty without that sliver of power that built and ate and tore apart worlds inside of her. His precious gift, his key, he had called her. A living gate, he promised. Soon. He had said he would add the other, and then find the third, so that the king inside him might rule again. They led her into a chamber with a table in the center. A white sheet covered it, and men watched as they shoved her onto the table, the altar. They chained her down. With the blood on her, they did not notice the cut on her arm, or whose face she wore. One of the men came forward with a knife, clean and sharp and gleaming. This won't take but a few minutes. Kaltain smiled up at him, smiled broadly, now that they had brought her into the bowels of this hellhole. The man paused. A red-haired young man walked into the room, reeking of the cruelty born in his human heart and amplified by the demon inside him. He froze as he saw her. He opened his mouth. Kaltain Rompier unleashed her shadow fire upon them all. This was not the ghost of shadow fire that they had made her kill with, the reason why they had first approached her, lied to her when they invited her to the glass castle, but the real thing, the fire she had harbored since magic had returned. Golden flame now turned to black. The room became cinders. Kaltain pushed the chains off her as though they were cobwebs in a rose. She disrobed as she walked out of the room. Let them see what had been done to her, the body they wasted. She made it 2 steps into the hall before they noticed her, and beheld the black flames rippling off her. Death, devourer of worlds. The hallway turned to black dust. She strode toward the chamber where the screaming was loudest, where female cries leaked through the iron door. The iron did not heat, did not bend to her magic, so she melted an archway through the stones. Monsters and witches and men and demons whirled. Kaltain flowed into the room, spreading her arms wide, and became shadow fire, became freedom and triumph, became a promise hissed in a dungeon beneath a glass castle. Punish them all. She burned the cradles. She burned the monsters within. She burned the men and their demon princes, and then she burned the witches, who looked at her with gratitude in their eyes and embraced the dark flame. Kaltain unleashed the last of her shadow fire, tipping her face to the ceiling, toward a sky she'd never see again. She took out every wall and every column, and she brought it all crashing and crumbling around them. Kaltain smiled, and at last burned herself into ash on a phantom wind. So sad. Oh. So sad. Manon ran, but Alid was slow, so painfully slow with that leg. If Kaltain unleashed her shadow fire before they got out, Manon grabbed Alid and hauled her over her shoulder, the beaded dress cutting into Manon's hand as she sprinted up the stairs. Alid didn't say a word as Manon reached the dungeon landing and beheld Astrid and Sorel fighting off the last of the soldiers. "Run!" she barked. They were coated in that black blood, but they'd live. Up and up they hurtled out of the dungeons, even as Alid became a weight born of pure defiance of the death surely racing toward them from levels below. There was a shudder. Faster! Her second made it to the giant dungeon doors and hurled herself against them, heaving them open. Manon and Sorel dashed through. Astrid shoved them sealed with a bang. It would only delay the flame a second, if that. Up and up, toward the Eyrie. Another shudder and a boom, screaming in heat. Down the halls they flew, as if the god of wind were pushing at their heels. They hit the base of the Eyrie tower. The rest of the 13 were gathered into the stairwell, waiting. "Into the skies," Manon ordered, as they took the stairs, one after another. Alid so heavy now that she thought she'd drop her. Only a few more feet to the top of the tower, where the wyverns were hopefully saddled and prepared. They were. Manon hurtled for Abraxas and shoved the shuddering girl into the saddle. She climbed up behind her as the 13 scrambled onto their mounts, wrapping her arms around Alid. Manon dug her heels into Abraxas' side. "Fly, now!" she roared. Abraxas leapt through the opening, soaring up and out, the 13 leaping with them, wings beating hard, beating wildly. Morath exploded. Black flame erupted, taking out stone and metal, racing higher and higher. People shouted and then were silenced, as even rock melted. The air hollowed out and ruptured in Manon's ears, and she curled her body around Alid's, twisting them so the heat of the blast singed her own back. The Eyrie tower was incinerated and crumbling away behind them. The blast sent them tumbling, but Manon gripped the girl tight, clenching the saddle with her thighs as hot, dry wind blasted past them. Abraxas screeched, shifting and soaring into the gust. When Manon dared look, a third of Morath was a smoldering ruin, where those catacombs had once been, where those yellow legs had been tortured and broken, where they had bred monsters. There was nothing left. Damn. Chapter 83. Aelin slept for 3 days. 3 days, while Rowan sat by her bed, healing his leg as best he could while his abyss of power refilled. Adian assumed control of the castle, imprisoning any surviving guards. Most, Rowan had been viciously pleased to learn, had been killed in the storm of glass the prince had called down. Cale had survived by some miracle, probably the eye of Elena, which they'd found tucked into his pocket. It was an easy guess who had put it there, though Rowan honestly wondered if, when the captain woke up, he might wish he hadn't made it after all. He'd encountered enough soldiers who felt that way. After Aelin had so spectacularly leashed the people of Rifthold, they found Lorcan waiting by the doors to the stone castle. The queen hadn't even noticed him as she sank to her knees and cried until Rowan scooped her into his arms and, limping slightly, carried her through the frenzied halls, servants dodging them as Adian led the way to her old rooms. It was the only place to go, Better to establish themselves in their enemy's former stronghold than retreat to the warehouse apartment. A servant named Philippa was asked to look after the prince, who had been unconscious the last time Rowan had seen him, when he plummeted to earth and Rowan's wind stopped his fall. He didn't know what had happened in the castle, though through her weeping, Aelin hadn't said anything. She had been unconscious by the time Rowan reached her lavish suite of rooms, not even stirring as he kicked open the locked door. His leg had burned in pain, the rough healing he'd done barely holding the wound together, but he didn't care. He'd barely set Aelin on the bed before Lorcan's scent hit him again, and he whirled, snarling. But there was already someone in Lorcan's face, blocking the warrior's path into the queen's chamber. Lysandra. "May I help you?" the courtesan said. The courtesan had said sweetly. Her dress was in shreds, and blood, both black and red, coated most of her, but she held her head high and her back straight. She'd made it as far as the upper levels of the stone castle before the glass one above it had exploded, and showed no plans of leaving any time soon. Rowan had thrown a shield of hard air around Aelin's room as Lorcan stared down at Lysandra, his blood-splattered face impassive. "Out of my way, shifter." Lysandra had held up a slender hand, and Lorcan paused. The shapeshifter pressed her other hand against her stomach, her face blanching, but then she smiled and said, "You forgot to say please." Lorcan's dark brows flattened. "I don't have time for this." He made to step around her, shove her aside. Lysandra vomited black blood all over him. Rowan didn't know whether to laugh or cringe as Lysandra, panting, gaped at Lorcan and at the blood on his neck and chest. Slowly, too slowly, Lorcan looked down at himself. She pressed a hand over her mouth. "I am so sorry." Lorcan didn't even step out of the way as Lysandra vomited on him again. Black blood and bits of gore now on the warrior and on the marble floor. Lorcan's dark eyes flickered. Rowan decided to do them both a favor and join them in the antechamber, shutting the queen's bedroom door behind him as he stepped around the puddle of blood, bile, and gore. Lysandra gagged again and wisely darted to what looked to be a bathing room off the foyer. All of the men and demons she'd wasted, it seemed, did not sit well in her human stomach. Fuck, I lost my spot. Now my eye's watering. The sounds of her purging leaked out from beneath the bathing room door. "You deserve that," Rowan said. Lorcan didn't so much as blink. "That's the thanks I get?" Rowan leaned against the wall, crossing his arms and keeping the weight off his now healing leg. "You knew we'd try to use those tunnels," Rowan said, "and yet you lied about the word hounds being dead. I should rip out your goddamn throat." "Go ahead. Try." Rowan remained against the door, calculating every move of his former commander. A fight right here, right now, would be too destructive and too dangerous with his queen unconscious in the room behind him. "I wouldn't have given a shit about it if it had just been me. But when you let me walk into that trap, you endangered my queen's life." Looks like she did just fine. "And the life of a brother in my court." Lorcan's mouth tightened, barely. "That's why you came to help, isn't it?" Rowan said. "You saw Adian when we left the apartment. I did not know Gavriel's son would be in that tunnel with you until it was too late." Of course, Lorcan would never have warned them about the trap after learning Adian would be there. Not in 1,000 years would Lorcan ever admit to a mistake. "I wasn't aware that you even cared." "Gavriel is still my brother," Lorcan said, his eyes flashing. "I would have faced him with dishonor if I had let his son die. Only for honor, for the blood bond between them, not for saving this continent. The same twisted bond was leading him now to destroy the keys before Maeve could acquire them. Rowan had no doubt that Lorcan meant to do it, even if Maeve killed him for it later. "What are you doing here, Lorcan? Didn't you get what you wanted?" A fair question, and a warning. The male was now inside his queen's suite, closer than most people in her court would ever get. Rowan began a silent countdown in his head. 30 seconds seemed generous. Then he would throw Lorcan out on his ass. "It's not over," the warrior said. "Not even close." Rowan lifted his brows. Idle threats. But Lorcan had only shrugged and walked out, covered in Lysandra's vomit, and did not look back before disappearing down the hall. That had been 3 days ago. Rowan hadn't seen or scented Lorcan since. Lysandra, mercifully, had stopped hurling her guts up, or someone else's guts, he supposed. The shapeshifter had claimed a room across the hall, between the two chambers in which the Crown Prince and Kale still slept. After what Aelin and the Crown Prince had done, the magic they'd wielded together and alone, 3 days of sleep was hardly surprising. yet it drove Rowan out of his mind. There were so many things he needed to say to her, though perhaps he would just ask how the hell she'd gotten stabbed in the side. She'd healed herself, and he wouldn't have even known were it not for the rips in the ribs, back, and arms of that black assassin suit. When the healer had inspected the sleeping queen, she'd found that Aelin had healed herself too quickly, too desperately, and had sealed her flesh around some shards of glass in her back. Watching as the healer stripped her naked, then began carefully opening the dozens of little wounds to dig out the glass, almost made him tear down the walls. Aelin slept through it, which he supposed was a mercy, given how deep the healer had to dig to get the glass out. She's lucky it didn't hit anything permanent, the healer had said. Once every shard was gone, Rowan had used his strained magic to slowly, so slowly, damn him, heal the wounds again. It left the tattoo on her back in ribbons. He'd have to fill it in when she recovered, and teach her more about battlefield healing, if she ever woke up. Sitting in a chair beside her bed, Rowan toed off his boots and rubbed at the faint, lingering soreness in his leg. Aedion had just finished giving a report about the current status of the castle. 3 days later, the general still hadn't spoken about what had happened. That he'd been willing to lay down his life to protect Rowan from the Valkfoot soldiers, or that the king of Ardalan was dead. As far as the former, Rowan had thanked him for that day in the only way he knew how, offering Aedion one of his own daggers, forged by the greatest of Dornell's blacksmiths. Aedion had initially refused, insisting he needed no thanks, but had worn the blade at his side ever since. But in regard to the letter, Rowan had asked, just once, what the general felt about the king being dead. Aedion had merely said he wished the bastard had suffered longer, but dead was dead, so it was fine by him. Rowan wondered if he truly meant it, but Aedion would tell him when he was good and ready. Not all wounds could be healed with magic. Rowan knew that too well, but they did heal, eventually. And the wounds on this castle, on the city, those would heal too. He'd stood on battlefields after the killing had stopped, the earth still wet with blood, and lived to see the scars slowly heal, decade after decade. On the land, the people, so too would Rifthold heal. Even if Aedion's latest report on the castle was grim, most of the staff had survived, along with a few courtiers, but it seemed that a good number of those people who had remained at court, courtiers Aedion had known to be worthless, scheming devils, hadn't made it, as if the prince had wiped clean the stain from this castle. Rowan shuddered at the thought, gazing at the doors. Aedion had vacated. The crown prince had such tremendous power. Rowan had never seen its like. He'd need to find a way to train it, hone it, or risk it destroying him. And Aelin, that brilliant, insane fool, had taken a tremendous risk in weaving her power with his. The prince had raw magic that could be shaped into anything. Aelin could have burnt herself out in a second. Rowan turned his head and glared at her, and found Aelin glaring back. Y'all, I saw a fan art. Okay. I saw a fan art of long-haired Rowan, and I just want to say that I get it now. And I'm sorry that I didn't get it before, but I 100% get it now. I get it, y'all. I do. I get it. I do. Absolutely, I get it. I saved the world, Aelin said, her voice like gravel, and yet I wake up to you being pissy. It was a group effort, Rowan said from a chair nearby, and I'm pissy for about 20 different reasons, most of them having to do with you making some of the most reckless decisions I've ever... Dorian, she blurted. Is Dorian... Fine. Asleep. He's been out as long as you. Kale? Asleep. Recovering, but alive. A weight eased from her shoulders, and then she looked at the Fey Prince and understood that he was unharmed, that she was in her old room, that they weren't in chains or collars, and that the king... what the king had said before he died. Fireheart, Rowan murmured, starting from his chair, but she shook her head. The movement made her skull throb. She took a steadying breath, wiping at her eyes. God, her arm ached. Her back ached. Her side ached. No more tears, she said. No more weeping. She lowered her hands to the blankets. Tell me everything. So he did. About the Hellfire and the Wordhounds and Lorcan, and then the past 3 days of organizing and healing, and Lysandra scaring the living shit out of everyone by shifting into a ghost leopard anytime one of Dorian's courtiers stepped out of line. When he'd finished, Rowan said, If you can't talk about it, you don't. I need to talk about it. To him, if only to him. The words tumbled out, and she did not cry as she explained what the king had said, what he'd claimed, what Dorian had still done. Rowan's face remained drawn, thoughtful, throughout. At last, she said, 3 days? Rowan nodded gravely. Distracting Adian with running the castle is the only way I've kept him from chewing on the furniture. She met those pine-green eyes, and he opened his mouth again, but she made a small noise. Before we say anything else, she glanced at the door. I need you to help me get to the bathing room, or else I'm going to wet myself. Rowan burst out laughing. She glared at him again as she sat up, the movement agonizing, exhausting. She was naked, save for the clean undergarment someone had stuffed her into, but she supposed she was decent enough. He'd seen every part of her anyway. Rowan was still chuckling as he helped her up, letting her lean against him as her legs, useless, wobbling like a newborn fawn, tried to work. It took her so long to go 3 steps that she didn't object when he swept her up and carried her into the bathing room. She growled when he tried to set her on the toilet itself, and he left his hands upraised, his eyes dancing as if to say, "Can you blame me for trying? You might very well fall into it instead." He laughed once more at the profanities in her eyes, and when she was done, she managed to stand and walk the 3 steps to the door before he hefted her into his arms again. No limp, she realized. His leg, mercifully, was mostly healed. Her arms draped around him. She pressed her face into his neck as he carried her toward the bed and breathed in his scent. When he made to set her down, she held on to him, a silent request. So Rowan sat on the bed, holding her in his lap as he stretched out his legs and settled into the rows of pillows. For a moment, they said nothing. Then, "So this was your room, and that was the secret passage. A lifetime ago, a whole other person ago. You don't sound impressed. After all your stories, it just seems so ordinary. Most people would hardly call this castle ordinary." A huff of laughter warmed her hair. She grazed her nose against the bare skin of his neck. "I thought you were dying," he said roughly. She held him tighter, even if it made her back ache. "I was. Please don't ever do that again." It was her turn to puff out a laugh. "Next time, I'll just ask Dorian not to stab me." But Rowan pulled back, scanning her face. "I felt it. I felt every second of it. I went out of my mind." She brushed a finger along his cheek. "I thought something had gone wrong for you, too. I thought you might be dead, or hurt, and it killed me not to be able to go to you. Next time we need to save the world, we do it together." She smiled faintly. "Deal." He shifted his arm so he could brush her hair back. His fingers lingered along her jaw. "You make me want to live too, Aelin Galathinius," he said. "Not exist, but live." He cupped her cheek and took a steadying breath, as if he'd thought about every word these past 3 days, over and over again. "I spent centuries wandering the world, from empires to kingdoms to wastelands, never settling, never stopping, not for one moment. I was always looking toward the horizon, always wondering what waited across the next ocean, over the next mountain. But I think that whole time, all those centuries, This corny ass shit. Shut the hell up. I wish I had my tabs. I did not bring my tabs today. I was just looking for you. What? Shut the hell up. Corny ass shit. He brushed away a tear that escaped her then, and Aelin gazed at the Fey prince who held her, at her friend, who had traveled through darkness and despair and ice and fire with her. She didn't know which one of them moved first, but then Rowan's mouth was on hers, and Aelin gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, claiming him as he claimed her. His arm wrapped tighter around her, but gently, so careful of the wounds that ached. He brushed his tongue against hers, and she opened her mouth to him. Each movement of their lips was a whisper of what was to come once they were both healed, and a promise. The kiss was slow, thorough, as if they had all the time in the world. There she goes again with that fucking shit. My eyes watering so bad. As if they were the only ones in it. Every time I start to like Rowan, fucking SJM always fucking reminds me of Sam some way. She always hits me with that all the time in the world. Shit. God damn it. My eye is watering. Realizing he'd forgotten to tell Rowan about the letter he'd received from the Bane, Adie and Ash River walked into Aylin's suite of rooms. Damn! In time to see that Aylin was awake. Finally awake, and lifting her face to Rowan's. They were sitting on the bed, Aylin in Rowan's lap, the Fey warrior's arms locked around her as he looked at her the way she deserved to be looked at. And when they kissed, deeply, without hesitation, Rowan didn't so much as glance Adian's way before a wind snapped through the suite, slamming the bedroom door in Adian's face. Point taken. A strange, ever-changing female scent hit him, and Adian found Lysandra leaning against the hallway door. Tears gleamed in her eyes, even as she smiled. She gazed at the closed bedroom door, as if she could still see the prince and the queen inside. That, she said, more to herself than to him, that is what I'm going to find one day. With him! With him! She's going to find that with him! Y'all. A gorgeous Fey warrior, Adian said, shifting a bit. Lysandra chuckled, wiping away her tears, and gave him a knowing look before walking away. With him. With him! She's gonna find that with him. She's gonna find that with him. Oh, God damn it. Apparently, Dorian's golden ring was gone, and Aylin knew exactly who had been responsible for the momentary blackness when she'd hit the ground as the castle collapsed, who had bestowed the unconsciousness courtesy of a blow to the back of her head. She didn't know why Lorcan hadn't killed her, but she didn't particularly care, not when he was long gone. She supposed he'd never promised not to steal the ring back, though he'd also never made them verify that the amulet of Orinth wasn't a fake. Too bad she wouldn't be there to see his face when he realized it. The thought was enough to make Aylin smile the next day, despite the door she stood before, despite who waited behind it. Rowan lingered at the end of the hallway, guarding the only way in or out. He gave her a nod, and even from the distance she read the words in his eyes. I'll be right here. One shout and I'll be at your side. She rolled her eyes at him. Overbearing, territorial Fey beast. She'd lost track of how long they'd kissed for, how long she'd lost herself in him. But then she'd taken his hand and laid it on her. He had pulled back at that wince, and when she tried to convince him to keep going, he told her that he had no interest in betting an invalid, and since they'd already waited this long, she could cool her heels and wait some more, until she was able to keep up with him, he'd added with a wicked grin. Damn. Aylin shoved away the thought with another glare in Rowan's direction, loosed a steadying breath, and pushed down the handle. He was standing by the window, overlooking the wrecked gardens where servants were struggling to repair the catastrophic damage he'd caused. Hello, Dorian, she said. My husband. Y'all, my husband is back. He is back. Y'all, that fan art of him, oh, made my toes curl. That fan art is so good. So good. So fucking good. Okay. Chapter 84. Dorian Havillard had awoken alone in a room he didn't recognize, but he was free, even though a pale band of skin now marred his neck. For a moment, he had lain in bed, listening. No screaming, no wailing, just a few birds tentatively chirping outside the window, summer sunshine leaking in, and silence, peace. There was such an emptiness in his head, a hollowness in him. He'd even put a hand over his heart to see if it was beating. The rest was a blur, and he lost himself in it, rather than think about that emptiness. He bathed, he dressed, and he spoke to Adie and Ash River, who looked at him as if he had 3 heads and who was apparently now in charge of castle security. Cale was alive, but still recovering, the general said, not yet awake, and maybe that was a good thing, because Dorian had no idea how he'd face his friend, how he'd explain everything, even when most of it was mere shards of memory, pieces he knew would further break him if he ever put them back together. Yeah, also another thing, I went home and I was literally showering. I was in the shower, and this was after I read 67 through 79, so like the whole freeing Dorian and all of this. This was after that, and I was in the shower and I was thinking about those chapters, and I was thinking about Res, and then I realized, and I'm gonna cry just like saying it, sorry, my phone is dying, and I literally screamed when I realized that the soldiers Dorian was torturing in the dungeon were literally Chaos men. Like, they were literally Chaos men. And then I thought, I'm literally gonna cry, oh my god. And then I thought, because there was a chapter that was like, one of the soldiers had recognized Dorian and was like begging him, and I'm like, what if that was fucking Res? What if that was fucking Res? And he was like, or Brulo, and like, I can't believe I didn't realize it. And then I was thinking about it in the shower, and I literally was like, I dropped my loofah and everything, and I was like, I can't. It was too much. And then I just cried for like the rest of my shower. It was too much. Too much. She's too much. She makes me mad. No, literally, like it made me, there's so many points in this book that, or in this series, that just make me not want to continue it. And that was another one of those. When I realized it, I was just like, how can I continue reading this when shit like that is happening? Like, it's so, anyway, yeah. A few hours later, Dorian was still in that bedroom, working up the nerve to survey what he'd done, the castle he'd destroyed, the people he'd killed. He'd seen the wall, proof of his enemy's power and mercy. Not his enemy, Aelin. "Hello, Dorian," she said. He turned from the window as the door shut behind her. She lingered by the door, in a tunic of deep blue and gold, unbuttoned with careless grace at the neck, her hair loose at her shoulders, her brown boots scuffed. By the way she held herself, the way she stood with utter stillness, a queen looked out at him. He didn't know what to say, where to begin. She prowled for the little sitting area where he stood. "How are you feeling?" Even the way she talked was slightly different. He had already heard what she'd said to his people, the threat she had made and the order she'd demanded. "Fine," he managed to say. His magic rumbled deep inside him, but it was barely more than a whisper, as if it was drained, as if it was as empty as him. "You wouldn't be hiding in here, would you?" she said, slumping into one of the low chairs on the pretty, ornate rug. "Your men put me in here so they could keep an eye on me," he said, remaining by the window. "I wasn't aware that I was allowed to leave. Perhaps that was a good thing, considering what the Demon Prince had made him do. You can leave whenever you please. This is your castle, your kingdom." "Is it?" he dared ask. "You're the king of Ardalan now," she said softly, but not gently. "Of course it is." His father was dead. Not even a body was left to reveal what they'd done that day. Aelin had publicly declared she'd killed him, but Dorian knew he'd ended his father when he shattered the castle. He had done it for Chaol and for Sorscha, and he knew she'd claimed the kill because to tell his people that he'd killed his father. "I still have to be crowned," he said at last. His father had stated such wild things in those last few moments, things that changed everything and nothing. She crossed her legs, leaning back in her seat, but there was nothing casual in her face. "You say that like you hope it doesn't happen." Dorian stifled the urge to touch his neck and confirmed that the collar was still gone and clenched his hands behind his back. "Do I deserve to be king after all I did? After all that happened? Only you can answer that question." "Do you believe what he said?" Aelin sucked on her teeth. "I don't know what to believe. Parrington's going to war with me. With us. My being king won't stop that army. We'll figure it out." She loosed a breath. "But your being king is the first step of it." Beyond the window, the day was bright, clear. The world had ended and begun anew, and yet nothing at all had changed either. The sun would still rise and fall. The seasons would still change, heedless of whether he was free or enslaved, prince or king, heedless of who was alive and who was gone. The world would keep moving on. It didn't seem right, somehow. "She died," he said, his breathing ragged, the room crushing him. Because of me. Aylin got to her feet in a smooth movement and walked to where he stood by the window, only to tug him down onto the sofa beside her. It's going to take a while, and it might never be right again, but you... She gripped his hand, as if he hadn't used those hands to hurt and maim, to stab her. You will learn to face it and to endure it. What happened, Dorian, was not your fault. It was. I tried to kill you. And what happened to Cale? Cale chose. He chose to buy you time, because your father was to blame. Your father and the Valg Prince inside him did that to you, and to Sorsja. He almost vomited at the name. It would dishonor her to never say it again, to never speak of her again, but he didn't know if he could let out those 2 syllables without a part of him dying over and over again. You're not going to believe me, Aylin went on. What I've just said, you're not going to believe me. I know it, and that's fine. I don't expect you to. When you're ready, I'll be here. You're the Queen of Terrasen, you can't be. Says who? We are the masters of our own fates. We decide how to go forward. She squeezed his hand. You're my friend, Dorian. A flicker of memory from the haze of darkness and pain and fear. I came back for you. You both came back, he said. Her throat bobbed. You pulled me out of Enderveer. I figured I could return the favor. Dorian looked at the carpet, at all the threads woven together. What do I do now? They were gone. The woman he'd loved, the man he'd hated. He met her stare. No calculation, no coldness, no pity in those turquoise eyes. Just unflinching honesty, as there had been from the very start with her. What do I do? She had to swallow before she said, You light up the darkness. Damn. Cale Westfall opened his eyes. The afterworld looked an awful lot like a bedroom in the stone castle. There was no pain in his body, at least. Not like the pain that had slammed into him, followed by the wearing blackness and blue light, and then nothing at all. He might have yielded to the exhaustion that threatened to drag him back into unconsciousness, but someone, a man, let out a rasping breath, and Cale turned his head. There were no sounds, no words in him, as he found Dorian seated in a chair beside the bed. Bruised shadows were smudged beneath his eyes. His hair was unkempt, as if he'd been running his hands through it, but beyond his unbuttoned jacket there was no collar, only a pale line marring his golden skin, and his eyes, haunted but clear, alive. Cale's vision burned and blurred. She had done it. Aylin had done it. Cale's face crumpled. I didn't realize I looked that bad, Dorian said, his voice raw. He knew then that the demon inside the prince was gone. Cale wept. Not Cale crying. Dorian surged from the chair and dropped to his knees beside the bed. He grabbed Cale's hand, squeezing it as he pressed his brow against it. You were dead, the prince said, his voice breaking. I thought you were dead. Cale at last mastered himself, and Dorian pulled back far enough to scan his face. I think I was, he said. What happened? So Dorian told him. Aylin had saved his city, and saved his life too when she'd slipped the Eye of Elena into his pocket. Dorian's hand gripped Cale's a bit tighter. How do you feel? Tired, Cale admitted, flexing his free hand. His chest ached from where the blast had hit him, but the rest of him felt... He didn't feel anything. He couldn't feel his legs, his toes. Oh my god, is he paralyzed? Is he paralyzed? The healers that survived, Dorian said very quietly, said you shouldn't even be alive. Your spine. I think my father broke it in a few places. They said Amethy might have been able to... A flicker of rage. But she died. Panic, slow and icy, crept in. He couldn't move. Couldn't... Oh my god. Is he paralyzed Is he paralyzed everywhere? Oh my god. Are y'all for real? Are you for... not the wheelchair. No, stop. Y'all are gonna make me laugh. Y'all are gonna make me... Y'all are gonna make me laugh. It is not funny. Oh my god. from the waist down. Oh my god. Panic, slow and icy, crept in. He couldn't move. Rowan healed 2 of the injuries higher up. You would have been paralyzed. Dorian choked on the word. From the neck down otherwise. But the lower fracture, Rowan said it was too complex, and he didn't dare trying to heal it. Not now that he'd gotten Dorian back. Not now that they'd all somehow survived. I'll wait for a healer here. There are no healers left here. Not magically gifted ones. My father and Parrington wiped them out. Cold flickered in those sapphire eyes. Cale knew that what his father had claimed, what Dorian had still done to him despite it, would haunt the prince for a while. Not the prince. The king. The Torre Sesame said, might be your only hope of walking again, Dorian said. I'm not leaving you. Not again. Dorian's mouth tightened. You never left me, Cale. He shook his head once, sending tears slipping down his face. You never left me. Cale squeezed his friend's hand. Dorian glanced toward the doorway, a moment before a hesitant knock sounded, and smiled faintly. Cale wondered just what Dorian's magic allowed him to detect. But then the king wiped away his tears and said, Someone's here to see you. The handle quietly lowered and the door cracked open, revealing a curtain of inky black hair and a tan, pretty face. Nesrin beheld Dorian and bowed deeply, her hair swaying with her. Dorian rose to his feet, waving a hand of dismissal. Adian might be the new head of the castle security, but Miss Philique is my temporary captain of the guard. Turns out the guards find Adian's style of leadership to be... What's the word, Nesrin? Nesrin's mouth twitched, but her eyes were on Cale, as if he were a miracle, as if he were an illusion. Polarizing, Nesrin murmured, striding right for him, her gold and crimson uniform fitting her like a glove. There's never been a woman in the King's Guard before, Dorian said, heading for the door. And since you're now Lord Cale Westfall, the King's Hand, I needed someone to fill the position. New traditions for a new reign. Cale broke Nesrin's wide-eyed stare to gape at his friend. What? But Dorian was at the door, opening it. If I have to be stuck with king duty, then you're going to be stuck right there with me. So go to the Torre Sesame and heal fast, Cale, because we've got work to do. The king's gaze flickered to Nesrin. Fortunately, you already have a knowledgeable guide. Then he was gone. Cale stared up at Nesrin, who was holding a hand over her mouth. Turns out I wound up breaking my promise to you after all, he said, since I technically can't walk out. Turns out I wound up breaking my promise to you after all, he said, since I technically can't walk out of this castle. She burst into tears. Remind me to never make a joke again, he said, even as the crushing, squeezing panic set in. His legs. No, they wouldn't be sending him to the Torre Sesame unless they knew there was a possibility he would walk again. He would accept no other alternative. Nesrin's thin shoulders shook as she wept. Nesrin, he croaked. Nesrin, please. She slid onto the floor beside his bed and buried her face in her hands. When the castle shattered, she said, her voice cracking, I thought you were dead. And when I saw the glass coming for me, I thought I'd be dead. But then the fire came, and I prayed. I prayed she'd somehow saved you too. Rowan had been the one who'd done that, but Cale wasn't about to correct her. She lowered her hands, at last looking at his body beneath the blankets. We'll fix this. We will go to the southern continent, and I will make them heal you. I've seen the wonders they can do, and I know they can do it, and... He reached for her hand. Nesrin. And now you're a lord, she went on, shaking her head. You were a lord before. But you're the king's second in command. I know we will figure it out, Cale said. She met his stare at last. I don't expect anything of you. We'll figure it out. You might not even want a crippled man. She pulled back. Do not insult me by assuming I'm that shallow or fickle. He choked on a laugh. Let's have an adventure, Nesrin Philique. Aww. Aww. The end. Aww. I love her. I love them. I love all of these characters. And I know they don't all survive this series. And so I'm sad thinking about it. I love all of these characters. How am I supposed to choose which ones? Like, I won't. Even at this point, if Lorcan dies, I feel like I'll be affected because she wrote the characters so fucking good for this series. I was gonna do a review. Okay, so I was like writing up a review for people we meet on vacation to post on my blog today, because I want to start posting on my blogs on Sundays, since my Mondays turned out to be like the busiest days of the week, and then that way I have all week and then like the weekend to work on my blog reviews, right? Anyway, I was gonna do a review of the Assassin's Blade and then just do reviews of each book, but I think I'm just gonna do a review of like the entire series. Hold on, I need to plug in my phone before it dies. So done, I'm like talking to y'all. The Caltaine scene made me want to literally like tear my car apart just bit by bit. It made me very sad and angry that she didn't get out herself, but at the same time, she was able to help so many other people. So, I mean, I guess I just have to look at the fucking bright side. But could you imagine Caltaine's power going up against like everyone during the war? Like, bitch would be just like, and she'd just have to do this, and like an entire army would be wiped out. Like that's so cool. That's so cool to me. But I'm sad that she's gone. But like, I get it. I don't know what she gave a lead to give to Aelin, though. I was gonna call her Feyre. I don't know what she gave a lead to give to Aelin. Like the thing that she took out of her arm, I don't know what that was. And I don't think I'm supposed to know, but I am excited to see what it is, because it seemed like it was important. I'm not ready to start Empire of Storms, or Empire of Storms of Empire, something like that. I'm not prepared to start it because I heard that it was really sad. And I am one more sad thing away from just like chucking myself into this lake. What are your thoughts on Rowan now? My thoughts on Rowan are, I guess that I like him. I do like him now. And I see the potential. I see what y'all see now. And it was really mainly that fan art that I saw of him that I was like, oh, yeah. What are your thoughts about Empire of Storms? I have none, because I haven't read it. I just heard that it's sad, so I'm like scared to read it. The whole book's fun. Okay, fun like there's like a lot going on, or like fun like I'm gonna be like crying through most of it. Fun. Cause that's not fun for me. That's fun for y'all. It's not fun for me. And to think, I will never forgive y'all. Y'all had me so excited to finish the Assassin's Blade. Oh my god. Literally, when y'all told me that y'all wanted me to do a live for the end of the Assassin's Blade, I thought it was going to be like Aelin and Sam killing Arabin together, or like running away together. Like, can y'all believe how optimistic I was about this fucking series? Oh, Jesus. And now look at us. Predictions? Predictions for Empire of Storms? I don't really have any. I don't really know where we're going anymore. I thought that this book was just going to end with like them getting Dorian out or something. I did not expect the king to die this book. And I did not expect the king to not be the main villain. I did not expect the Duke of Wesselton to be the fucking, whatever the fuck his name is, Erwin. Yeah, I did not expect that. So my thought, like my predictions were completely like just thrown off the fucking board when that happened. But I guess now I would say that Empire of Storms is going to be like the tandem read. One of the books is going to be about Kale healing, which I'm not too excited to read that because I don't really care about Kale that way to have an entire book with just him and Nesrin going to the southern continent. But I do feel like while they are there, they're going to bump into Irene. And she's going to be the one to heal him. Because let's be honest, that's what they're setting it up for, right? They're going to go to the southern continent to find a really talented healer. Irene was in Assassin's Blade. She got the money to go to the southern continent to become a healer. So I feel like they're going to meet Irene, and then they're going to bring some sort of help back with them. Yeah, like I know it's important, and like I know I'm not going to skip it. I know it's something that I kind of have to read, but I'm not looking forward to it, if I'm being honest. And then I feel like Empire of Storms is going to be about Aelin and Dorian sort of like teaming up with Manon and going back to the mountains to sort of wipe out what's there. That's where I see this going. Yeah, that's where I see this going. But then they can't really go back to the mountains because that's where Parrington is. And I don't think we're facing him yet, unless the last books are about Aelin fighting Maeve. But we still have Maeve to deal with. So I don't know. There's too many pieces on the board right now. Like there's too many. Like I feel like we have to face this issue in this continent before we go back to Wendelin and face like Maeve, who is like still like a active threat because Lorcan is still there. So I don't know where none of this is going. I'm letting go of the reins, and I'm letting SJM take me in whatever direction she wants to take me. And I mean, there's nothing I can really do about it but just go with the flow. So what are Manon's eyes? Aren't they like black and gold flecked or something like that? Yeah. I really want her and Elide to be together, but I know she's probably going to end up being with Dorian because they kind of set it up. She was like his savior or whatever in a way. So I feel like they're going to do that. But I would have preferred Elide to be with Manon, if I'm being honest. I really do want them to be together. And I'm really going to be upset that they're not. Or they're straight gold. The tandem read is worth it. I hope so. There's a guy on Book Talk that I follow. I don't know. Y'all probably know him. He's pretty big. He is Australian. And I think he skipped, what is it called? Tower of Dawn. Yeah, I think he skipped Tower of Dawn. And when I saw that, I was like, oh dang, like, I wonder what happens in it that made him skip it, but now I know. No, I'm going to read it, y'all. Yeah. You'll be happy with the pairings. Does that mean that Elide and Manon end up together? Because Manon is a lesbian. I'm sorry, Manon is a lesbian. She's a lesbian. He shouldn't have, but he did. Oh, so you know who I'm talking about. Yeah, I saw that he did that, and I was like, oh. But I feel like skipping a book in a series is kind of like, dang. That's what I was gonna say. I feel like even if you don't want to read it, like skipping a book in a series is like not a very like good idea because even with even though I still have not read what is it called, Frost and Starlight or something like that, I went and I read the summary of the chapters, so at least I knew what the hell like what they were talking about in there. Wait, 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 wait. Y'all, after this tandem read, I'm going into Kingdom of Ash? Wait, wait. I thought I had more time than this. I thought I had more time. I thought I had more time. I definitely thought I had more time. And I don't. Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. Well, well. I'm gonna put that shit off as long as I possibly can. Oh my god. So I'm almost done with this series. I don't want to finish it. This is like what, this is, honestly, this is one of my favorite series that I've read. Oh my god, I don't want to finish it. So sad. Alright, well, I gotta go. I gotta go pick up my mom at 4. That's 3:50 for me, so. Thank y'all for watching. Thank y'all for, I don't know. I don't think we had any more issues after the beginning with the connection and all that, but, yeah. Alright. I will see y'all not tomorrow. What do I have going on Tuesday? I'm not babysitting, but I feel like, I know I said I could go live on Tuesday, but now I'm thinking that I have something going on Tuesday that I'm not sure. Oh! My cat is getting spayed. But that shouldn't take up my afternoon. I don't think it'll take up my afternoon. So I think I can still go live on Tuesday. But this bitch is finally getting spayed. Because the vet that I took her, the spaying place that I take her to lied to me and said that they absolutely cannot spay her if her milk is still there. And we still have 2 of her kittens at home. They literally have not stopped breastfeeding, and I've tried everything to get them to stop, and they still have not stopped breastfeeding. So her milk hasn't dried up. And so I haven't been able to get her spayed. But this bitch went into heat, and I'm pretty sure she's pregnant again. So I called another vet place, and I told them, I was like, well, her milk isn't dry, and now she's probably pregnant again, because she gets out of our house all the time. I don't know how, but she gets out all the time, and she went in heat, and she hasn't been in heat again. So I told them she might be pregnant again, and they're like, oh yeah, we can take her. It's gonna be like $300 though, because they're probably gonna have to perform an abortion on her, and then I don't know. Will you be reading on Wednesday night? Yes. Oh yeah, so we're finishing this book probably Tuesday. I need to double check and make sure that yeah, we're finishing this book definitely either on Tuesday or Wednesday. But yeah, I have to figure out how long or like what time I need to pick her up from getting spayed and all that. So I will let you guys know. But anyway, I hope y'all have a great rest of your Sunday, and I love y'all, and I'll see y'all either on Tuesday or Wednesday. Wait, what? Oh yeah, Crescent City is next. Yeah, Crescent City's next. Finish it. Finish it alone? Finish Queen of Shadows alone? Oh, y'all want me to finish this book alone? I can. Oh, okay. We'll start Empire of Storms next live then. Yeah, because it's really short what I have to read for Queen of Shadows. So, okay. We can start either on Tuesday or Wednesday. We'll start Empire of Storms. I'm pretty sure I can do Tuesday. I'll schedule a live for Tuesday. Wait, what? What's a light in the flame? Wait, what?